We are up. We're live.
Did you see us yet? Not yet. Oh, there's like that.
There's a couple seconds delay every time we go live.
Okay.
We are joined in-house with some special guests here in Charlottesville, Virginia, so we're really excited. Live studio audience. If you would like to be a live studio audience, reach out to us and come drink our wine. It's great. We are excited for the Burgundy tasting today. We'll start in just a couple of minutes. Always, taking care of some technical difficulties.
Remember, don't wait to open your bottle. Go ahead and open it now.
That's right.
Start pouring. Enjoy. We will be talking about both the red and a white this evening. We started with the white.
Yeah, this season we've really only opened one bottle each time, but tonight we've opened both just because Burgundy is such a special wine region, and we're excited to try both of them back to back, side by side.
It is a special region, and it's hard to imagine even scratching the surface in the roughly 30 minutes that we'll be discussing it, but we'll try to give you a good overview that'll sort of lead you into our focus bottles.
More of a teaser, really.
Teaser.
It's like if you like any of these discussions, just imagine a mountain of more information below it, and that is Burgundy.
Yeah.
All right, so should we start it?
Okay, let's get. Well, you know what? Let's one more minute.
One more minute.
One
All
more
right,
minute.
one more minute.
You know, no one's ever
7:02.
really exactly on time.
That's right. That's right.
That's not how these things work. But so for all of you joining us, thanks for being here tonight. We are Vino, and we're going to be talking about Burgundy, and we're going to get officially started in just another minute. Hope that you have some good snacks, some good wine.
Right. One of the things that's really nice about doing these events is when we've gone to the regions. And so tonight we'll be dabbling with some conversation pieces that we experienced firsthand, which is super exciting.
Yeah, we've actually been to Burgundy, which we have not yet been to Rhone or the Loire.
No.
Which were our previous topics this season, but we have had the pleasure of going to Burgundy. So we're going to have some the photos and videos from our trip, which is pretty cool.
It'll be interesting when we do this and we go through and we're drinking the wine and we're talking about it. Normally we're escaping to a region. We're traveling there through the bottle, but now we get a little bit of nostalgia.
Yeah.
How fun is that?
All right, I think we can get started.
So hi everybody, I'm Steven.
And I'm Beth.
And we're Vino. And we're concluding this session, our winter session, as the first day of spring was just a couple of days ago?
That's right. It was also my birthday. I am born on the last day of winter, so I'm always keenly aware of this.
That's right. And for your birthday, we put together a wine presentation for everybody to enjoy and bring everybody together for the wonderful, wonderful narratives of wine.
So we're going to be talking about Burgundy, France tonight.
That's right. So where is Burgundy, France? So we started in Loire in the green, and then we were like, okay, we're going to hop over to Lyon and go down to the Rhone Valley, but we can actually go back up to Lyon to go to Burgundy, which is just north of Lyon.
So this is a region that's in the northeast of France. We have it labeled here with some stars on the map. This is, it is one of the most prestigious, one of the most expensive wine regions in France, in the world, but it is incredible. It is the mark to which many other wine regions measure themselves, and you can get some really, really special wine from this region. You don't have to spend $5,000 in an auction to do it, as we're hoping to prove tonight.
That's right.
It's one of the greats.
It is. And that's why we have to talk about it. We want to talk about it. It's always a great reason to start drinking some Burgundy, is when you're doing it from an academic perspective.
Yeah. By the way, before we move on, I do want to mention Beaujolais is actually part of Burgundy, even though it's different in many ways. Just like all French wine regions, it seems that there are pretty different places sort of stuck together. In this case, Beaujolais, Gamay is the main grape, and it is the very bottom of Burgundy, and technically for administrative reasons it's sort of considered part, but it's separate, so don't worry about it tonight.
One of my favorite regions is Beaujolais.
We do love Beaujolais.
We do love Beaujolais. If you are planning on going to Burgundy, you can fly into Paris and then drive, but recognize it is a long drive, and all of the flights
you will be sleepy because you just came overnight on a plane.
As I said, words of experience. So I guess we'll talk about our trip a little bit. Wait, can I get it to work? Oh no, it's buffering a little bit. All right.
So we had the amazing privilege to travel to Burgundy with some of our best friends who are in the live studio audience tonight.
Hey!
And we got to see the countryside by car, And so this video shows just how utterly beautiful like everything in Burgundy is. It's the most lovely, charming region. Just these beautiful stone walls, stone buildings, vineyards everywhere, little churches, monasteries.
And it is as
fabulous restaurants in little town squares and centers.
I loved how everything is perfectly even road. Like when you're driving by, I got to just sit in the passenger seat of it, and it was mesmerizing and just beautiful and experience.
It was like this when we were there, you know, a little bit overcast, but you know that didn't detract from the beauty at all. It was just stunning. I thought it was just a really beautiful wine region in comparison to, I mean, they're all beautiful, but in compared to some others, I think it was really, really one of the most beautiful I've been to.
And one of the things to really focus on when you travel to Burgundy is your homework ahead of time. You have to reach out and schedule your tastings ahead of time.
Oh, this is not going to be anything like California. If you've ever done wine regions in the United States, this is nothing like that. This is a place where you need to know in advance where you're going. You need to schedule in advance. It's very possible that you will reach out to winemakers and they will deny you the ability to visit them because we're talking about people who work with much smaller quantities, and everything is very family owned and operated. So they're smaller operations. They're just not set up for the lavish tasting rooms that you might see in Napa Valley or something like this. And they often do. It really benefits you to speak some French as well.
True.
It can go a long way, and the tasting experiences, if you do get to have one, though, are incredible.
Yeah. If you do, you're likely not going to be able to purchase wine. That was a shock for us. So we were able to taste some amazing wine that we could not buy to take home with us. And then also one of the other ones that was interesting is if you're doing a cellar tasting, it's such precious wine that you can take a sip of the wine and then you're actually expected to pour your glass back into the barrel.
If you do not finish.
If you do not finish.
Yes.
So just keep that in mind. It's not gross and everything's living in there. So you're helping out the ecosystem. All right, moving on with that.
Every drop. All right, so
unpacking Burgundy.
Burgundy. There are 4 major regions to think about. Chablis is like way over to the side. That's actually one of my favorite. So that one's separate. So we have Côte d'Or, Côte Chardonnay, and Mâconnais. And Côte d'Or, although if you speak any French, or is gold, it's actually from the phrase Côte d'Orient because it's the eastern facing. So it's not about how it's precious as gold, although that is kind of fun imagery as well.
So the title here, How to Buy Burgundy. It's interesting because when you go to a wine shop and you're buying American wine, you're going to oftentimes see the varietal name on there: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, right? But here in Burgundy, everything is going to be by the village name.
Oh, and it's not very hard for you to know what the grape is. I mean, yes, there are other grapes, and we'll mention one of those briefly. But if it's a white, it's Chardonnay, and if it's a red, it's Pinot Noir.
Exactly. So when we look at the labels, we're going to see some of these names, like Moret Saint Denis, right? And inside of that are specific Premier Cru, Grand Cru, and then the community wine areas, right? And so if you know these names and you see it in a wine shop, then you know what you're purchasing. Otherwise, you might not know exactly what you're looking at.
Oh, and for you to know that, you have to be familiar with it. And by the way, there's 600 plus Premier Cru, 30 plus Grand Cru, and however many others. So there's a lot of villages to keep track of.
And it's not to dissuade you from taking on a love of Burgundy and diving deep into it. This is more of, as we said, scratching the surface of it, getting excited about it. Because if you go into a wine shop and you want to purchase a Burgundy, and you want somebody to help you purchase a Burgundy, their Burgundy expert will be very excited to meet you. Because when somebody learns about Burgundy and they know about Burgundy, they want to share that information with you. It's like a rite of passage, if you will.
Yeah, Karen McNeil said in the Wine Bible that we don't usually start your wine journey with Burgundy, but many people do end up there in the end.
And I think you can end there because you can spend a lifetime studying it. Case in point, we have 2 labels, right? Both are made from the Dujac winery. And in here, they are both from the Moret Saint Denis, right? So we know that we just saw that it's a village. Okay, inside of that, what can we take away from these two labels, right? We see Domaine du Jacques and du Jacques Fille Perret, right? In order to put domain on there, it means that it has to be estate grapes, right? So the du Jacques Fille Perret, they purchased those grapes. Now they work with the people that they purchased the grapes from, right? But you just have to know that domain is that those are their estate grapes.
Now, something interesting to know about the word domain. It's not going to be like in, let's say, Bordeaux, where you imagine this castle and then there are all these vineyards right next to it, and they make this wine there and house it. It's all that. No, domain means that they own it, but the way Burgundy property laws work, people will often own rows in vineyards scattered around, and they'll make wine out of each different place separately to explore the terroir, and all of that is considered their domain.
Yeah, really cool. I didn't even know all that. That's awesome. And just wanted to put up one more label here, and that's their Grand Cru, right? And
you can tell because it says Grand Cru.
Because it says Grand Cru. But what we don't see on here as clearly is the Moray Saint Denis. You have to look underneath the Domaine du Jacques, and that's when you can start to see it really far down there, right? So the wine labels themselves can be quite confusing.
Right, so Clos de la Roche, if you know, you know, that's telling you what you need to know. And I think sometimes they'll choose to include the Moray Saint Denis type level of information and sometimes not. But a lot of places in Burgundy are so special. They're these Le D, and they are named themselves. So specific parts of specific vineyards in specific villages, they have this really unique terroir, and those get their own name, and they put that name on the bottle.
It's interesting because when we look at this Grand Cru label, it's actually trying to help us out too, because we see Messi, like the bottled at domain.
Mise en bouteille au domaine.
Yeah, thank you so much, our French translator here for me. But we already know that because it says domain, and then we see Grand Cru, but we already know that because obviously we already know that Clos de la Roche is a Grand Cru site. So I mean, they didn't even need to put that on the label, and we could have totally have known that. Totally. I think one of the great things is to go to your local wine shop. We harp on that a lot. We say, go to your local wine shop, find somebody, a Sherpa, to help you get into a great bottle today. And I think one of the other telling points, especially if you're looking for a Grand Cru or a Premier Cru, is just the price point.
Yeah, I mean, that can definitely give you some information about its popularity.
That's right. All right. So I'm going to briefly, I've made some notes, and what I'm going to do is just kind of do a little story time.
Story time.
Not too long.
Okay, it is. I think it's buffered. It's ready.
All right.
More videos.
More videos. So this is literally from an alley in Meursault.
We were looking for the recycling at this time, and we were not able to find it.
All right, so a little history lesson for everybody. Millions of years ago, covered by the sea, this land was. That's where we get the limestone and marl. Marl is limestone and clay mixture. And then around 50 BC, that's when we really start to see these vines be planted and viticulture start in this region. That comes over by the Celts, which predates the Romans. When we think about French wine, so much of it...
It's always the Romans.
It's always the Romans. But here we have the Celts first, then the Romans. Of course, the Catholics come after there, and then we have the Benedictine monks around 900 AD that set in. But it's actually the Caesarean monks around 1100. Ooh, when we're talking about monks, we can always kind of raise the screen up a little bit because we got some monks above us.
Oh, yeah.
Shout out to the monks. All right.
They've played an important role in the history of wine.
They have. Now, what's interesting is not all monks are alike. So around 1100, we have monks that come in that denounce financial wealth. They live a life of poverty. Hard work gets them closer to God. And we actually get a lot of recordation at this time period. We get a lot of this returning back to the earth, right? Trying to produce a great grape, which is awesome. And that sets forth the rise of the Pinot Noir grape. Duke Philippe. Do you pronounce the P-E on the end? Is it Philippe? Philippe. All right, sure. I know zero French. All right, so 1395, we have Duke Philippe of Burgundy that outlaws Gamay. As Beth was saying earlier, that we have Beaujolais and Burgundy as separate regions.
There was a big war on Beaujolais, the Gamay grape.
They hated it. Get rid of it. I actually not prefer, but I really love aged Gamay. I prefer Gamay when it's aged, and it's
It does
wonderful.
start to present a bit more like an aged Pinot Noir, FYI, side note.
Side note. And then one last little tidbit of information to take away is the French Revolution
Vive la Revolution!
sets forth the Napoleonic Code, which means that all of your children get rights to the land that you own.
And this is why Burgundy is chopped up into so many tiny little bits. So,
And you can have where one person or group of people own one row.
like literally a row. So like one vineyard could have. This is something I read that was helpful. Okay, so a vineyard, it can be in Burgundy. It can be like a condominium. So different people own the units, but the vineyard still gets one name, right? So 60 people could own a piece of one vineyard.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. And we're also talking about, when we were talking earlier about Grand Cru and Premier Cru and Village, these are also designations that are separated by one row of vines.
Which we'll get into soon.
Exactly. I did hear a funny story when we were over there that somebody who was in a Premier Cru site would pick up the larger stones and chuck them over to the Grand Cru site, trying to, I don't know, elevate themselves or lower them. One of the two. I don't know. It was a joke. I don't know.
Or was it?
Or was it?
Okay, so we did just allude to this. So the placement of Grand Cru, Premier Cru, Village, and sort of just the regional wine, it's very specific based on where it is on the slope in Burgundy.
And this really is an evolution of, the soil types like we had from 50, millions of years ago when this was sea life, and we have crustaceans and sea mineral deposits and such. But nowadays it's about erosion, right? So when the rain hits at the top, we actually get some nutrient fall off that goes into that mid slope, and then down at the bottom it's almost too fertile. We want grapes to struggle a little bit.
Grapes have to struggle to make excellent wine.
That's
yeah,
right.
and this also has to do with the sun exposure as well.
That's right.
Which as things are getting warmer everywhere, some parts of the slope that maybe were less desirable are now more than they ever were before.
That's very true. And of course, we're starting to see where, in order to keep that Burgundian style, that freshness,
but also the minerality.
They can still go out to their vineyards and just harvest a little earlier if it's a little hotter. So there's still ways that they can, maintain what it means to be a Burgundy. All right.
So this is a pyramid that kind of gives you a sense of, the red to white ratio and the different quality levels. And again, we talked about quality levels. We've been throwing these words around: Grand Cru, Premier Cru. But so Grand Cru is at the top. Then we have Premier Cru, then the village appellations, and then, red and white Burgundy. So you can see white dominates a little bit here. And there is a little bit of rosé as well.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that 3% of French wine comes from Burgundy. So even inside of this, it's
steep
actually
competition for these bottles.
It's steep competition for the land.
Yes.
Very expensive land, because the land is limited.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So
So you can't really talk about Burgundy without talking about sustainability, because this is a region where people really care about the past and the future, and they are very much obsessed with taking good care of their earth. And so you'll find a lot of producers here are using sustainable practices. And we've talked previously about how there are a number of different types of certifications that you can get. There can be organic, biodynamic. In France, there's a number of different levels of sustainability certifications that have come out as well. And a lot of times when you look on the back of the bottle, you can see whether or not your wine bottle meets one of those. But even if they haven't gone ahead and gotten that certification so they can stick that stamp on their bottle, everyone here in Burgundy cares deeply about their land. And so very little use of pesticides. They're going to let natural plants be growing in the vineyards, and just all around thinking about the long term.
Yeah. And we got to figure, we were talking about the Celts at 50 BC coming here and planting grapes for the first time. This is a 2,000-year-old wine experiment. It's one of the oldest in the world. And so they really are limiting the amount of how much herbicides and pesticides you can use, because then the grapes evolve with the land, is the thinking that they have. Then Pinot Noir and Chardonnay will evolve as whatever happens to the earth. And so what we're looking at here is actually an organic-ish farm. They still use some legal pesticides in Burgundy. And what we can see, we'll kind of break it down a little bit, but when we talk about biodynamic, one of the principles is to take manure, put it into a bull's horn, bury it through the winter, and then take that remnants that happens in the spring, whatever's inside of that bullhorn, mix it with water, put it inside of a copper pack, and walk through the vineyards and spray your vines for the next harvest. And when we talk about biodynamic and organic, there's such a care. It pulls the farmers out off the tractors and puts them into the vines and into the vineyards, and so that way they can be more connected. And so this is a biodynamic vineyard versus, one that's still farmed with Burgundian acceptable practices, and we just see more vegetation, right? Not as much moss, but more actual like weeds and life. And we also don't see the droppings of the previous year's vines because they've been composted over the years. Whereas, when it's not just teeming with life, it takes a little bit longer for things to break down in those regions. So biodynamic, and then
We do love biodynamic wine.
it's wine you can feel is kind of what they're saying.
And because we're on the topic of plants and nature, fungus. So many of the cellars in France, Burgundy included, kind of love their fungus. Their fungus helps with the aging of the wine, and they have a kinship with the fungus. This fungus is not seen as something to like get rid of. It's something that you let be there. And so when you're walking around a very old cellar, you'll see a very fuzzy looking layer on lots of surfaces.
When I was listening to Diana Snowden of Domaine du Jacques, she was talking about how when she first came to Burgundy and was looking at all this fungus, she was trained to be so clean and so sterile. And she's actually pulled that back a little bit and said cleanliness is good, sterilization maybe not so much, because you've removed the good bacteria, the good fungus that actually helps clean the air, right, of bad toxins.
And can impact how the wine is oxygenated while aging in a very desirable way.
Yeah. And of course, as we said, this is a 2,000-year wine experiment. A lot of these places use natural yeasts that come in.
Yes.
They use whole cluster fermentation. And what that does is allows little pockets of, bioactivity to happen at different rates in the whole vat of wine while it's forming. And all that life that's teaming together comes to an expression that we feel. So, Burgundy.
Yeah.
It's great.
People get very poetic. Okay,
They really do.
So wine varietals we mentioned. If it's a red, it's Pinot Noir. If it's a white, it's Chardonnay. And that's mostly true unless you're in Beaujolais. And then if it's a red, it's Gamay. And also there's some Aligoté floating around. It's fun. It's tasty. It's not Chardonnay, but you'll see it.
Yeah. And Aligoté will be labeled on the bottle if they
will let you know.
They will let you know it's Aligoté. Otherwise, it's Chardonnay. We had the privilege of labeling while we were over there. A little bit of Aligoté.
Yeah. So give it a try. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Aligoté is a workhorse. It flowers later and fruits earlier. So it's great. All right. So now we're into our IP focus for the evening. And Beth, what do you think this is? What's going on here? What is this a picture of?
A boomerang. No.
A boomerang.
I'm seeing something that looks like it's capturing some either gas or liquid. I'm seeing like a stainless steel vat or pot kind of thing. What are we looking at?
We're looking at CO2 sequestration, right? So in the process of fermentation, we have a lot of CO2 that's coming out of the grapes, right?
Yeah, in fact, so much that if you have a very enclosed area, it can be dangerous.
Because there's not enough oxygen? Mm-hmm. Wow. That'd be a hell of a way to go. So with 130...
Say that H word on.
Oh my, I don't know. We might get a... whatever. So 130 bottles will produce about 1 hectoliter of... 1 hectoliter of juice is 130 bottles. So 130 bottles produces about 11.5 kilograms of CO2.
Wow!
And that's for 12.5% ABV wines.
Oh my gosh.
The higher the alcohol content, the more CO2 is let off. And so if we were to compare how much we're talking about in terms of the kilograms of CO2, because that's people drive automobiles and they understand that 1 gallon is about 8.8 kilograms. So, we can see that they're roughly in the same ballpark of being able to offset the carbon from 1 gallon of gas equivalent here in the vineyards. When we blow it up to the entire region of Burgundy, we can see that a large amount of CO2 is created. And then when we think about other regions like Bordeaux, even more CO2 is produced. So the question becomes, can we capture the CO2 and reuse it? And what's fascinating is that there's different ways to sequester the CO2 or to just reuse it again so it doesn't just go into nothingness, into the atmosphere. In the fermentation process, you have these plurality of tanks, and you want to excavate out the oxygen from them because the oxygen inside the fermentation process is not ideal. And people will typically use dry ice in order to do this. But the idea is that
nitrogen,
you could...
essentially.
Nitrogen, yeah. And so the idea is that you could actually have one fermentation process going in a first tank, use the CO2 from that first tank to push out the oxygen in the second tank, and so on and so forth. So that way you
already made it.
You already made it. You might as well use it. Another great way is it's so clean. When we think about reusing the CO2 from fermentation versus out of the exhausts of a car, it's clean CO2.
Yeah.
You can actually use this, bottle it for beverage making.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
To make fizzy drinks.
Also, wine doesn't typically grow in really, areas where agriculture is really large. So if you have greenhouses nearby, you actually want to meter in CO2. And then when, of course, we can start getting into more expensive carbon sequestrations where you turn the CO2 into methane or sodium bicarbonates, potassium bicarbonates, which are just captured fuel sources that can be used in other ways.
But presumably that would involve transporting it somewhere. So if you could just use it straight on the vineyard,
exactly.
That's better.
That's really cool.
Cool.
And then I really love this topic. I follow, where carbon sequestration is happening anywhere. There's microbial elements in caves out in California that convert CO2 into rocks. And not that has a function outside of it, but it just captures the CO2. And who knows where it goes from here. But fun fact for everybody out there, Beth and I really have gotten into Formula One. And next year, what happens?
So the new regulations in Formula One are going to require that, and it's interesting because Formula One is called Formula One because of the basically rocket fuel that they use to power the cars, but they're going to have to go sustainable, so they're going to have to use biofuels.
And one of those biofuels could be this potassium carbonate that is off of the sequestration of vineyard.
Dig it.
Yeah, how cool. So we'll see if we'll keep you tuned on that if that happens.
Yeah.
Here's just a map of what a vineyard site could look like, where we're pumping them together and then capturing it. And so I just like diagrams.
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
Important wine making terms and things. Okay, so when you're making wine in Burgundy, you age things in oak barrels. If you're making a white wine, you might do batonnage, stirring the lees.
And this allows for so malolactic fermentation. Our little yeast eat up malic acid and get rid of lactic acid, right? Anyways, the lees stirring is really cool because it actually releases this catalyst type, the catalysis formation inside of the enzymes of dead yeast cells,
which lets the wine become like this really lovely, creamy, rounder flavoring.
Yeah. And when we think about some of the California Chardonnays, it can represent as very kind of buttery and
right. So yeah, there's a lot of pushback against the buttery chards, but oak aging and lees stirring and all these processes to make the white wines in Burgundy have a bit of oak influence, a bit of creaminess. These things are phenomenal. So right. Don't knock it till you try it. Definitely try yourself an oak Chardonnay from Burgundy before you give up on oak Chardonnay.
Exactly. And I think it really plays into the whole expression of what we get from our white wines. We get minerality. The oak notes that are in there play very well with it, and even
everything's really well balanced.
Everything's well balanced, and it's not necessarily buttery, but more like a cream cheese, or like a brie cheese, a triple cream brie cheese.
All right, so tonight we are drinking the Vire-Clesse. We've thrown up the stats from Wine Access, who kindly gives you a little bit of information. So this is an enjoy right away. You don't need to decant this. Obviously, being white, it's a Chardonnay. Ideal serving temperatures, a little cooler. We are getting a lot more acid and fruit from this wine. We're not getting as much oak.
Right. We really are excited to try this wine because when we were studying it, this specific village is kind of one of the last value Burgundian Chardonnays that you can find. And so I think it really shines, and the price point was very approachable.
So we hope you're enjoying it.
Hope you enjoy it. Yeah, I think it opens up really nicely too as we have it in our glass.
That's one of the things about Burgundy wine, that if you're new to Burgundy wine, it's important that you know it will evolve in the glass. It is the kind of wine that opens up and changes. So if you take a sip right when you open it from the bottle and you're like, give it time, they can really, really evolve and become very, very beautiful. Another thing to keep in mind is that, especially regarding the Pinot Noirs, you might be used to decanting a red wine, but you don't really want to do that with Pinot Noir from Burgundy. You want to go ahead and pour that into into the glass, and then let it open up in your glass. Typically.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's somebody somewhere who found one that it works better the other way. But
and one thing to kind of think about when we're drinking Chardonnay is if it represents as like a lemon or an apple, we can maybe think that it was a cooler vintage or that they harvested early. And if we're getting more of like a pineapple-y kind of tropical fruit, they could have harvested later, or it was a hotter vintage.
Nice.
Just kind of some things to think about.
Yeah.
All right.
A little bit of Albert Bichot,
Just because we were able to get both bottles from the same producer, which is really nice to be able to taste them side by side.
That can be a really great way to explore what terroir really means, because you can have a producer who makes their wine the same way across the board from different sites, and it really lets you see how those different sites express.
That's right. And I always like to try to find a way to say what's similar about these two wines. Not necessarily in terms of tasting, but in terms of feel, right? Or the acid, or the way that they bring that experience to us.
Yeah.
Throw up some here. As we were talking about earlier about organic, sustainable practices, pulled this right from their website, just really showcasing how beautiful their land is, and how they treat their land, how they treat the harvest, the pruning in the fall and in the winter. They really take it that the good grapes produce good wine from the vineyard to the cellar.
So winemaker in France, sometimes people use this term, and in Burgundy they mostly use this term vigneron, and it actually means wine grower. So the people who are making the wine are also growing the grapes. They're one and the same. They see it all as one thing because their job is to help the wine express the land. So they don't see it as separate, that they don't see you taking care of the grapes and then making the wine as two things. It's all one thing.
And it tastes great.
Yeah.
All right. And our second focus bottle for the evening is our red wine.
We should get a little bit of that.
And so when we look at the label here, what do we see?
Beaune.
We see Beaune.
We see a little bit of slushy splash over here. We see a Clos. I see a Clos.
I see a Clos. And so they have enough to say that the grapes that were picked from here are from a specific Clos site, and they're using branding. They're using trademarking in order to say, hey, this is special to us. They're really putting their name behind it. They're saying, we care about this. It's not just Beaune, right? It's our Clos, and we think that you should follow it. See how it evolves, how it advances over the years.
So again, see how they say enjoy right away. So they're not suggesting you decant this. So this is, it's a red from Burgundy, so it is Pinot Noir.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at, you serve this a little bit warmer than the white, but still on the cool side. I think I noticed the other one as well. They say from now until the 2030s. Burgundies the finest Burgundies can age forever. A lot of Burgundy benefits from 5 to 7 years of aging, at least.
When I was researching this specific event that we're putting on right now, what I kind of came across a couple of times was saying that the natural yeast fermentation is what they really believe help give the wine the structure in order to age as long as it does. And I thought that was fascinating, because we know from beer making that you can change the yeast and the entire flavor is completely altered. But when we're drinking wine, we want something that gives us an expression and a feeling, but then also longevity, something that we can drink and see it evolve in the bottle, this living organism, this living wine.
Yeah. I mean, these are very much alive, and they're changing all the time. So,
All right.
well, we hope you're enjoying this one as well if you decide to open this evening.
Of course. All right. And that concludes this session as well as the season.
Series. So so the series we covered major regions in France. We did Loire, we did Rhone, and then we did Burgundy. And we hope that you enjoyed the ride.
Yeah. And Beth and I are going off to Italy in a week or two. In a week. And so maybe next year we'll be doing a little Italian wine because we'll have some videos from it. We can showcase what that looks like.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. Hope to connect with you between now and next year.